For a while now I've wanted a flood coolant system on my mill, but one of the things holding me back was the cost. Most of the systems seem to be well over $300, and I'm not too keen on the mist coolant system option either. This is mainly because the area that I work in isn't well ventilated. So much like my other projects, I decided to attempt to make my own budget-friendly system. I purchased a flexible coolant pipe from TEMU, along with a pond pump, 30mm tubing, some hose clamps, a valve, magnets, and a 27-litre plastic tub, all from Bunnings here in Australia. The plan is to use a piece of leftover alloy and create my own coolant manifold that will have a fitting for the coolant supply and an outlet that will allow the flexible coolant pipe to screw into. To start off this build, I need to take a measurement of the flexible coolant pipe thread, and also work out what sort of thread pitch this fitting has. From what I can gather so far, it has a metric M20 by 1.7mm thread. I've loaded the alloy stock into the vise, and now I'll be machining the faces down to create a more usable shape. It's moments like these where I think that it would be so much easier if I had a square piece of stock for this project. But when you're trying to use up leftover material, I guess this is the price you pay. On a positive note, it's an opportunity to get in some more practice on the mill. So after all that, I'm now left with an alloy block. I can now start planning on where the coolant fittings will be. I'm thinking that the flexible coolant pipe should exit the bottom, and by the way, I finally purchased some machinist marking fluid. So at this stage, I'm drilling down to the point where I'll be left with 10mm of material. I've center point drilled, followed by enlarging the hole with a 13mm and then 16mm drill bit. After this, I'll head over to the lathe and bore the hole out to an 18mm diameter, ready for thread cutting. Before I can clamp this down, I'll need to swap the 3-jaw chuck with the 4-jaw chuck. I can already feel myself leaving my comfort zone. And with the magic of editing, I've saved you looking at the back of my black shirt for 10 minutes while I battled this heavy beast. I didn't bother filming the struggles I faced when trying to center the part. All you need to know is that I got it close enough to continue. Before I can start threading, I need to bore the hole out to 18.25mm. At this point in the build I was feeling confident and decided to skip using a tap and attempt to use the lathe instead. But as you all know, it's not that easy on my lathe and I will now need to tackle the change gears. Hopefully some of my viewers will now know what I'm up against when I choose to either use a tap or the lathe in future videos. The process starts with finding the thread pitch you want and then selecting 4 gears that will need to be installed onto the machine. Here are the many options that when paired with one another, the desired thread pitch is created. This is the combination I require. One wrong selection and it'll result in the part being scrapped and I'll need to start again. Pressure is on. After searching through the small amount of tooling I have for the lathe, I found that I only had one internal threading bar which was almost too large to fit. Time to do a sanity check, which is a scratch pass to see whether the thread that I've selected is correct. Now that I've confirmed that the thread pitch is correct, time to continue machining the threads out. And just like that, I've hit struggle street. I was a little too confident with power feeding it in, and now I've snapped the insert. Due to the hit to my confidence, I've decided to now hand feed the threading bar into the workpiece. I've left everything still engaged on the lathe, so it's no different to the motor running, I just turn it by hand instead. A quick test with the flexible tube shows that the thread is still too tight and needs to be bored out a little bit further. I'd definitely call that a win. The thread actually fits, and that is my first attempt at using the change gears to create an internal thread. Definitely not the prettiest of threads, but it'll definitely do the job. Next up, it's time to create the alloy fitting that will allow this tube to connect to that other piece that I've made earlier. To make the fitting, I'll be using this scrap piece of alloy that I used on a previous project. To start this off, I'll be taking a few passes to remove the knurling off this part. Now that the knurling has been removed, I'll now be machining the tip down to suit the 12mm tubing that I showed earlier. Now that I've squared off those internal edges, it's time to make a step down where the thread will end. After center point drilling this part, I'll now run a 10mm drill bit through the entire center. To hold the part, I decided to use a collet block that I'd purchased earlier in the week. This is probably not the best or most efficient way to hold the part, so if you'd like to put it in the comments down below a better way of doing this, I'd love to hear it. Before finishing the pipe fitting, I decided it would be best to drill and tap the thread in the alloy block first. This will allow me to test the part as it's cut on the lathe. Now that the M16 by 2mm thread has been created, I'll now be able to use that as a test when I create the threads on this alloy fitting. But before I can do that, it's back to switching another set of change gears into the machine that'll suit the new thread. From my earlier experience with thread cutting, I was feeling super confident at this point, but I soon hit struggle street yet again and I almost had to scrap the part. One of the issues I found when using a collet holder for this process was the fact that it didn't really hold the part tight enough. The minute there was load from the cutting tool, it seemed to shift the part off center and then create a wobble. This is where I increased the depth of cut way too far for how tight the collet holder was holding the part. After backing out the tool, off camera I reset the tool in the thread and then tried one more time, but it ended in disaster. It was at this point I felt completely deflated and I thought I'd ruined the part for good. But as a last attempt to save this part, I decided to try and use a die to correct the thread. And somehow I was able to save the part. I mean, the thread is quite loose, but with some sealant on the thread, it'll still do the job. Even though the fitting looks okay on camera, I still don't feel that good about it knowing what I had to go through to get to this point. But like I said, with a bit of sealant, it'll still do the job. Next up, it's time to glue the magnet to the back side of this. After letting the glue dry for a bit, it was time to test out whether the magnet was as strong as it said on the packet. And there you have it, that magnet is definitely not strong enough. Now that I've removed the magnet, it's back to the drawing board. My next idea is to drill and tap a thread into the alloy block. I'll then insert a thread into the drill and tapped hole, followed by drilling a hole through the mill and adding a nut to retain this piece. This is the thread that I cut off a screw earlier. I'd plan on screwing this into here as a stud and then drill a hole in the mill, followed by adding a nut to the back side of it. Luckily on my mill, the backside of this portion just here doesn't have anything on the inside and I can easily access the inside to add a nut. I had a quick change of heart and decided not to use a stud. I decided to switch back to the bolt and then put the bolt through the backside of this hole, then into the alloy block. I'm not sure if this is the right stuff to use, but this is what I had laying around, so it's time to apply some sealant to the threads to ensure that none of this leaks. Luckily my mill come with 2 hoses already fitted. I'll need to measure one of these hoses and then continue to drill a hole in the plastic tub lid. This valve will allow me to control the coolant flowing out of the tip of the nozzle. Although the pump has its own control valve, in the future I won't be able to access it as it will be submerged under the cutting fluid. It's now time to test out how the pump performs. This is the XDP 1000 water soluble cutting fluid. I chose this cutting fluid as it's always available at my local tool supplier. I've used this product in the past on my bandsaw and I'm very happy with its performance. In the future I'd like to wire in a switch that is on the mill for controlling the pump, but for now this will have to do. Hey Google, turn on Coolant.
Alright, turning on Coolant.
Straight away I've noticed an improvement in the performance of the drill. So far so good. The cutting fluid has clearly made a massive difference to the efficiency of how the end mill is performing. I can feel that there is a lot less resistance when feeding the cutting tool across the workpiece. Hey Google, turn off Coolant.
Alright, turning off Coolant.
I'm very happy with this upgrade, but I will be selective of when I choose to use the flood coolant, as in these videos I like to capture close-up shots of the machining process, and the coolant makes everything hard to be seen. Well, there you have it guys, this is my budget flood coolant system. Thank you to everyone who has watched along, and thank you to everyone who has made it this far in the video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment down below, and until next time, I'll see you in the next one.